outsource all of my bookkeeping, all of my accounting to somebody that loves doing that. And what you want to do as a business owner is take different areas of your business and say, okay, what part am I like really good at? And then how do I find and put people in places to where I'm not as strong in or I don't like doing, so they can actually do a job 10 times better than what I would ever do. And Clint is one of those resources to help create those policies and procedures. And then, of course, on the marketing side, what is it exactly you do on the marketing side?
On the marketing side, we really try and focus on helping business owners view their marketing from a strategic, overarching point of view, because we found that what happens to every small business person is you get inundated through email and especially through telephone calls for SEO ranking, Google ranking, please support this fundraising activity, advertise in our local journal that is here in the community, or put up a billboard or something along those lines. And business owners, especially when they're starting out, they will have a tendency to buy something, a service or exposure or something along those lines, based upon how well they get along with the person who contacts them. They don't really think about it from a strategic point of view, and that is so critical, because when you're making these kinds of decisions from a strategic point of view, then again it puts you back in an ability to make a black or white decision. If somebody's calling you, for example, to promote SEO services, and I'll let you know, we don't do web pages, SEO services, or anything along those lines, but we do help companies incorporate those things into their strategic plan. But if you have somebody from Google even calling you up saying, participate in our program and we'll guarantee you some kind of a ranking, front page ranking or something along those lines, well, you've already decided at that point, where does my web page figure into my overall marketing mix? How many new customers or new relationships do we build based upon our web presence? A lot of companies who have been in a certain industry or in a certain area for a long period of time use their web page, and rightly or unrightly so, as a brochure only. Now, I certainly think that there can be an awful lot of use put to a web page, but if you're thinking about it from a marketing standpoint, that's all that some companies need, is a brochure where somebody can go and they can learn a little bit more about the products or services that are provided, maybe some information about the personnel who are going to be on the team, who are helping them, who have certain areas of responsibility, as well as some contact information. That's all well and good. Do you really need a high SEO ranking in that case? I would argue no. If you're someone, however, who maybe has a skilled trade, though, for example, air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electrical, roofing, those kinds of things, then those are really highly driven based on internet searches. If you've ever had to call somebody out to fix a washing machine, for example, most people these days, if they weren't given a card by their parents, hey, call this person to fix the washer when it goes out, you're going to look on the internet. So in those kinds of cases where your new business is coming from a certain source, you want to pay a lot of attention to that. And that's what we encourage with our clients, is knowing where they need to pay attention to so that they can reach the goals that they've established. Most businesses, they don't set goals, and they attack their marketing based on emotional responses to the plea that is before them.
That's really well put. And like me having a marketing background, that's like, I know about marketing and advertising, so that's like a piece that's like really my core competency. And what Clint's talking about is really, really important if you are an entrepreneur, or even you're trying to build your brand for yourself and doing things on your own, is actually being able to choose which media is actually the right one for you. And when you're first starting out, you can spend a lot of money really fast testing things. And if you have a lot of money to get there, that's cool. But you work with somebody like Clint, and he can actually help guide you and say, this is really where you need to place your expertise based on the goals that you have. And if you don't have your goals and you're not even sure where to begin with that, he can help you formulate that stuff too. But now, I kind of want to shift gears here, because
if I can stop you real quick. And our conversations, just an FYI, our conversations frequently take these little detours. But going back, you mentioned something that I think is key. When somebody's calling in and talking to a customer service person, yes, they may be going off a script or whatever else, and you've got this agenda in your mind, or you've got this feeling that you need to get off your chest. I encourage you highly, highly, highly to, when you're not talking, to absolutely stop talking and completely focus your attention on listening to what that person has to say. Because frequently, I would say 90% of the time when I do this, I will get information from this person, this contact, that I never knew before, that will really help me in trying to get to the end that I'm seeking. Whether the person recognizes it when they're saying it to me or not, I'm able, by really focused listening, to be able to pick those things out of the conversation. So I think that's a key thing, is listening, even if you've got the problem and you're calling in. The other thing I wanted to kind of tie that back to is the whole customer service function and liability protection through human resources and other means, and marketing and so on and so forth. These decisions, the tone of these things, the theme of these things are set by the leader. And one thing that I really encourage our clients to do is go from being the technician, go from being the manager, to being the leader of their company, of setting the tone, of taking care of the employees in a way that is consistent with what is in the heart and the mind of the person who is running that company. This company is a reflection of that person and what he or she values and feels is an ideal that needs to be perpetuated. Focus on leadership tasks and skills so that you can manage better, and so that your employee on the phone can then communicate that in a way to the customer that cannot be communicated so easily in just a brochure or a web page or in print or whatever else. It's the connections that people form that will bring them back over and over. The leadership is key on that, and I wanted to bring those up.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And actually, it really falls in line with where I was going to shift gears to, because there's a lot of times in our lives where we want to have a certain outcome, and getting that outcome can be challenging. And especially, it's hard enough to do it on our own, right? So we'll jump to, you've lost some serious weight here in a month, like 10% of your weight, which is huge. And to actually figure out a way to do that and do that on your own is difficult. But now when you're dealing with other people and getting other people inspired to do something as well, whether it's what you're doing or what you need them to do, it can be so challenging. So when you were talking about the listening, I think that's a very key portion of it. A lot of times we do just listen enough so that we can just respond, and usually we're stuck on what we feel is the right way to handle this. But if we actually do stop and make that listening, that active listening, and paying attention to what people are saying and the essence of it, not just the words that they're using, but you can tell by their tonality what their personal emotion is. And that emotion and that feeling they're going through has nothing to do with you. 99% of the time, it's completely where they're at. Mm-hmm. So how do you actively listen? Like, how do you do that? Because it actually is a lot harder than most people think it is. They're like, no, I'm listening. No, you heard what the person said, but did you listen? Right? So what's the difference, and how do you do that in your relationships, whether it's on a customer service call or with your wife or your kids or me?
Well, it reminds me of the example. I think we've seen it played out dozens or hundreds of times in movies, where there will be a setting where there's an employee meeting or something like that, and somebody's completely not engaged. They're thinking about something. They're looking at a piece of paper, and then the leader of the meeting will say, or a teacher will ask the student, John, what did I just say? And they'll regurgitate back, word for word, what was just said. But there's no connection there. Mm-hmm. There's no listening going on. It's merely a hearing and restatement of it. And that's a key thing that I think is so different in it. How it's done, I have to make a confession here. I've confessed to this nice gentleman several times. I didn't find out until probably 7 or 8 years ago that I have ADD. Actually, it's called ADHD now, but ADD is a subset of ADHD rather. And since I have ADD, it is very easy for me to become distracted by things. If there is something going on in the background of this, I'm trying not to be distracted by it. If I'm on the phone talking to somebody, and I'll be talking on the phone and I'll be looking around my desk or around my walls or something along those lines, I'll be looking at my to-do list or my planner, and I will be easily distracted by those things. So if I'm going to listen, I have to set all those distractions aside. And I usually try to do it with a piece of paper that's in front of me where I'm taking notes about what they're saying.
That's a great strategy, by the way. Like just having one piece of paper, put your phone in another room if you're not on the phone. If you're on the phone, you're not looking at Facebook. That piece of paper where you're just taking copious notes around your pre-call preparation. But go ahead.
Well, not even with pre-call preparation, I'll turn the paper over and just get my, again, trying to listen deeply, my understanding of what they're saying and why they're saying it and what are the other little hidden things that are behind it. Where are some things where I can grab some clues that will help me ask a better question? And earlier I was talking about how to get to the higher person. One of the ways to get to the higher person is to ask better questions that push it out of the realm of the customer service agent's ability to help you, or the call service person's ability to help you. Really specific questioning is a fantastic, non-offensive way of doing that. So I have a blank piece of paper. I turn my phone over, so I'm not even looking at my phone. And then I just, throughout school, throughout college, I never would have graduated if I didn't show up and take notes, because I didn't enjoy reading at all. I would get through 3 lines in a paragraph and I would invariably have to go back and reread a sentence or two. So reading was not going to be my primary way of getting the information. So through the times when I was there for the professor's dissertation or discussion about it, that's when I would get most of my information. And I always had to take notes. And when I took notes, it kept me riveted, focused on what is the person saying and what did he or she just say and what's coming up next. So that's a very key thing.
Yeah, and I'm actually even going to take it one step farther, which might inspire you to actually do this active listening a little bit more, because it does take a certain amount of effort, especially if you haven't been practicing it. When you're the one listening more than the other person, now you're gaining their perspective and your perspective. And you'll actually become the leader of the conversation, because you can actually see where they're sitting, and finding the path to getting them to come over to your side of the table, your side of the agreement, becomes much more clear, because they're going to start talking about whatever it is that they're talking about, right? And it's going to be dropping some truths and some maybe not so truths. But you're going to know where they stand so incredibly clearly, so you can actually see where the disconnects are. So the fact that most people don't listen is actually like an advantage for you. If you are listening, you end up gaining so much power. That listening, it seems like we're giving up power because we're putting attention and energy on what the other person's saying, but it's actually that in that energy, we actually transmute that into power for ourselves to be able to respond, not just react, but actually respond to what they said and reframe it or say it back in a leading way, not just regurgitate what they say, but leading them to, well, if this and this is true, guess what? That supports what I want to get out of this. Mm-hmm. And you'll start to see those gaps, that conversation that would have been really frustrating where you felt like you weren't getting anywhere. You're going to see, instead of all these obstacles to getting where you want to go, you're going to start to see some opportunities with it. So it's really, really important. I love that simple way of doing it is put everything else to the side and take some notes. They can be bullet points. It can be one word, any little key thing that's going to keep you on track, because that's where the magic really happens, is when you actually can understand where that person's coming from, because then you just get to actually lead them to where you are, because you understand them, they don't understand you. When they understand you, then they can actually come on over.
Right.
So, and that's one of the other things that we do a lot of times. We try to make everything so complicated. We think everything should be so difficult, but it's simple practice of just having those notes there for yourself to go back to. And then it's also good when you get switched to that higher up person, you have all of your notes there and you can regurgitate all that information. You can just use it as little reference points and build your case, and then you outwit the person. It's actually, you don't have to be any smarter actually. You just have better access to more information. So that's great. So now how do you do this when you're not on the phone and you're with somebody and you're not taking notes? Like Clint and I go for long hikes a lot of times, and or bicycle rides, and we talk the whole entire time. One of the few people I get to have this much conversation with, and guys particularly don't talk nearly as much as women, but him and I get in a room, it's like this speed could go like probably 5 hours if we had the time for it. So how is it that you actively listen when you don't have the ability to take the notes?
Well, I think that we listen to different people in our lives with a different set of tools, actually. And we switch from the perspective that we're going to use from moment to moment, or for what's in our hearts, or from what we're trying to accomplish. I can have a conversation with one of my children, and it can be very focused on something that I would feel is important, but they feel is unimportant, or that we're all planning together to try and really have a good time in the future, maybe a vacation or a holiday get together or something along those lines. On the fun times, let's say we're planning a holiday get together, I'll already have in mind any kind of research that I've done. Again, it goes back to pre-call planning. Any kind of research that I've done, and I'll bring that up after I've had a chance to ask an opening question. Hey, Christmas is coming up this year. What would you like to do for Christmas, or Thanksgiving, or whatever it is? And then I'll listen to find out what my child or my wife wants to say and what they feel about it. And then I may ask a clarifying question. But it really goes back to the pre-call planning, even with my family. It's an excellent format to use. When it's done on the fly, and I haven't done the pre-call planning, that's when I find myself on my heels and trying to think very rapidly about everything that I've thought about the whole thing, and then putting it out into a meaningful participation in the discussion that forwards, what I think is best for the family, or what I think is best for the client, or, those kinds of scenarios. It's something that the pre-call planning is something that makes it easy. It's a crutch for me, and I really rely heavily on that.
Yeah, I wouldn't call it necessarily a crutch. I would call it like maybe a tool, because we have to know what we want to get out of things for us to be able to get out of that, actually get it to happen for us, right? And a lot of times we don't set goals or have an objective at the end of the day or at the beginning of the conversation, and then we end up getting caught up in whatever the conversation is, the emotions that go along with it, and whatever gets triggered in us or triggered in the other person, and we don't even stay on track. So we end up like walking away from conversations feeling like I'm deflated, like I have no idea what to do. So let's talk about that for a minute, because you do work with people in business and individuals. Like, how do you actually set goals? How do you come up with that pre-call or pre-conversation planning? How do you come up with that goal setting? What is the process you go through?
Well, there's a lot of conversation. There's a lot of time spent on the relationship and getting to understand who the person is. Of course, I have an ample opportunity to do that with my family. With a client, it's more focused. So we put in specific times when we are relationship building, and we are looking at what makes the client think is important. What does the client think is unimportant? What drives the client? Those kinds of things. What drives my children? Sometimes I'm baffled by that. But then I'll take that understanding, that information, and then as a consultant or as a father, it's easy then for me to take a long-term view of things. You can look at things and you can respond to things based on a short-term view or a long-term view. And certainly you could split those up into interim views as well. But whenever I'm dealing with somebody, especially when they're very, very close to me, I always try to consider what is my long-term objective that I want as a result of this relationship. So when I'm having a discussion with my son and he's trying to engage me as adolescents and teens often do, I try to focus on what do I want out of my relationship with my son. The number one thing I want out of a relationship with my son is a loving relationship that is mutually supportable and really adds value to his life and my life. So when he tries to engage me, I try to keep that very long-term focus or objective in my heart and in my mind. I have to actively bring it up so that I can then not become so reactive in a negative way. Certainly reacting in a positive way is great, but it helps attenuate my negative reactions so that then I can really focus on what he's saying. Taking it to the client side, there are certainly a lot of emotions involved in the workplace and in dealing with a client who's worked hard to build his or her business, and here I am coming from the outside and I'm suggesting things that are completely foreign to them. I try to keep our relationship in mind as what do I want, how do I want this person's business to grow, what are my long-term objectives for my relationship with this person and for his or her business. So I really try and focus on not what's right in front of me, but what's ahead in a year or 2 years or a lifetime.
Yeah, and that's such a good point, because we are emotional beings and we make our decisions based on the emotional state that we're actually in. As much as we might want to say that's not the case, and men usually have actions or access to really two emotions for some reason. This is kind of how we've been trained. Either we are happy and we're optimistic and we're like excited and that kind of positive emotion which can help us drive results, or we're angry. Right, our negative emotion, that's what most men in our society, I'm not saying you necessarily, but this is what you're going to be dealing with, right? We have those two. And when you're angry, you're coming from a place where there's not a bunch of possibility. There's only the one thing that you have right then and there, which is your anger. So there could be depression, or there could be blame, or there could be remorse, or there could be all kinds of negative emotions. But a lot of times men have like a speedway built in their neural pathways in their brain. It's like actually a highway that just can go right to anger. And if you're angry, you're going to approach any kind of problem as a problem that needs to be solved in the way that you want it to be. Whereas if you are going from a place of love, then the problem kind of disappears. What is most important is that you actually can express the love of the person that you have, and that love can actually inspire and create an opportunity where it would have otherwise been an obstacle, and you can find new ways of doing it. So to kind of just make it into like a really simple analogy, with your son, there's probably been times like maybe he didn't want to clean his room or do chores around the house, right? Does that happen ever?
Oh, yes.
Never, right? Never, not once, ever before. So what happens is when that friction happens, that can turn into a big argument. You want your kid to do his chores. He doesn't want to do his chores. You can get into a big argument about that. Has it ever happened?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But when you're arguing about it, how is that fulfilling your long-term goal of having that open communication, and loving relationship?
Exactly.
Right? So if you're actually arguing about it, it's not helping with the long-term goal. So if you have that long-term goal, what do you think you could say to your kid? Let's even reverse it for a second. In a normal scenario, the way most people do it, what is it that parents say to their kids when they say, do your chores? What is the final thing that they'll usually say to get them to do their chores? Do you have something that just will work when you're in that angry state?
Oh, well, it usually comes down to, if you don't do X, then I will withhold Y.
Right. So in some way, it might be, you want to live under my roof? I heard that a lot as a kid, and you better do da 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 da. Or if you want to be able to hang out with your friends, you better you better do it now. Or the infamous, because I said so, right? Do it. Why? Because I said so.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. Tell me right now, write in the comments, how does it feel when somebody says, do this because I said so? Like, what does that actually mean to you? Like, does that motivate you and make you want to do it? Do you maybe sometimes do it begrudgingly and like get frustrated with the person? So now,
and think about the different people who would say that to you. Your parent, your supervisor, your boss, a police officer, an IRS auditing agent.
Hopefully not.
Right, but these are authority figures who come into our lives who then try and force that down our throats. So anyway, I wanted to throw that in there because your perspective will change based on where you are in that dynamic as well as who's telling you.
Right, and when you actually say that to somebody, so if you're guilty of doing that, just think for a second, now you're teaching them that that is how you get things done. So if you have a kid and you start telling them, because I said so, one day they're going to want to be that person that can just say, well, because I said so. And how does that serve them as an adult in the world now? Is that their ego driving things? Or is that actually their self-centered, loving person? I would argue that that would probably be a very egoic thing, which egos run rampant in this world right now, and I don't believe it really actually helps us get farther than where we are. We got us where we are, but it's not the way of the future. So now in a loving scenario, and your kid doesn't want to clean the house or do his chores, what would you say in a loving way to actually inspire them to do it?
Well, I hate to keep hammering this theme in, but before I ever get involved in it, I think about what am I going to say. I think about what his interests are, and I think about how can we blend the two before I even go knocking on the door or initiating the conversation. I try and figure out what exactly do I want to accept and what will I reject beforehand. What do I know about whichever son I'm talking to and what floats his boat or what sinks his boat. And what are the best ways to communicate that so that without him having to actively listen, he'll still receive the message. So those are that really is the way in which I try to do it. I find that if I'm doing these kinds of plans in advance, a little bit of a dress rehearsal maybe even before I go in, I find that I'm able to guide the conversation a lot more effectively. I'm able to while not be emotionally disengaged, I'm able to think more rationally about my negative emotions in the moment and put them into a context. And of course, I'm also going for the big picture. If my son wants to have a dirty room, then that's one thing. But if he wants to hang out with people who are breaking into cars, or if he wants to start experimenting with drugs, then I really have to keep those priorities in mind as well. I can't demand victory at every turn. I'm really focused on making sure my victories come in the most significant and important ways that will have an effect now as well as in the future. And I also have to take a step back here in that when it comes to dealing with those kinds of issues with our kids, I'm generally not involved. I've outsourced those kinds of things to my wife.
Smart man.
Because I found that early in our relationship, she comes from a different culture than I come from, and we were butting heads all the time. And so I said, you know what? You handle these kinds of things. And as the bigger issues become apparent or need to be addressed, then I definitely want to be involved in those kinds of things. And so we've worked out a good pathway there. And I may disagree with what she's doing on that level, but I don't say anything because I want to be supportive of her. That's
an easy way to delegate out sometimes core competencies. That might not be your core competency in dealing with that all the time. In some scenarios, you got boys, so they're going to want to talk to their father too. So it's really important you get to keep that communication open. One thing that I know I like to do, and I do this with my wife, I don't have kids, at least not yet. So what I actually will do is before I bring anything to her that I kind of think might kind of rock the boat a little bit, or might be asking a little bit more, or I need to express something, is the first thing I always ask is, how are you doing? And that gives me such a key to her emotional state. So if she's like stressed out and overwhelmed, before I get to any of my shit, any of my things that I gotta bring up, I dig there and see how I can support her and help take her out of that emotion. And I use overwhelmed as an example because that's probably the most negative emotion that she seems to feel, because she's launched a new business. We travel a ton. We have lots of responsibilities, and she's taken on a ton of new stuff. And trying to handle it all can make somebody feel overwhelmed. And tell me if you ever feel overwhelmed or not, right? So feel free to comment, like, I always feel overwhelmed, or I never feel overwhelmed. And sometimes that's disguised as like anxiety, which is like worry about the future. And sometimes you just have too much on your to-do list. So the first thing I'll always do is get a grasp of the emotional state the person I'm speaking to is in. And this is when I've done some pre-planning and I have some thoughts about what I want to get out, right? So I'll come at this with a more calculated approach. And I don't want to talk about anything that's going wrong with me when somebody else is in a place where they're not going to be receptive to hear it. So sometimes that timing is really, really important. The next piece that I think is really important, it goes right along with what Clint was saying, is really when you understand where that person's at emotionally, and then you also have the plan of where you want to go, it makes it very easy to deliver a message where you're acting in. The most important thing long term is that this person knows that I actually care about them. And this could be your wife, your husband, your child, your best friend, or it could actually be the person working the cash register at your local grocery store. And before you actually get into any kind of issues, you want to know that state and let them know, like, I want you to be a happy person. Like this, I'm not coming here to like spoil your day. There's plenty of people that have their emotions all bottled up, and the first person they can vent it out on, and they do. So they might have a problem with the grocery store, and now they're screaming about like the conversation they had with their dad or their husband or something. I've seen it. I'm sure you've seen it too. So actually knowing long term, like, I'm going to see this person at the grocery store probably once a week. Like, I don't want to be the jerk. I actually would rather have them be so excited to see me. And by actually changing this way I have the conversation and taking these things into account, I get a lot of stuff for free. A lot of stuff for free that I never would have expected. All of a sudden they just turn around and hand me like an $8 chia pudding and like, here, go enjoy it. You know, here's dessert for you. Or, you know, it's really neat when you actually start taking this approach and the more long-term approach. So take an assessment of the relationships you have, and, you know, what are your goals with those relationships before you start acting on this one thing or maybe it's 5 things that you need to tweak. Before you get into that conversation, you want to figure out what those things are. And you want to figure out, am I going to try to tackle all of them now or later? And most importantly, knowing what the ultimate goal is of that relationship. Like, if you'd rather just not even be friends with the person, you just want to throw this stuff at them and be like, either you step up or like, we're not going to hang out ever again. That's an option too. But being aware of these things, being completely conscious of what you're trying to accomplish, gives you such an advantage over 99% of the population. So is there anything you want to add to that piece?
Well, I was a little bit distracted by something over here, and while you were talking, I was realizing I'm not giving as much listening attention as I probably should.
Huh?
But I agree with you completely. Is you become that person in the other person's life who makes it a great day, who changes the whole tenor, who changes a bad morning to a good morning. And that's always a wonderful thing you can do for anybody, whether you have frequent contact with them, regular contact with them, or maybe you'll never see them again. It's always a nice thing, and the giver always gets more than the receiver. And so you'll actually really be on a cloud 9 when you approach it from these kinds of things. Of course, you do get free items or discounts that other people don't know about. one thing that you mentioned is that you would you would ask Gabby how she's doing beforehand, and I think that's a critical thing in knowing about what the timing is and how you need to address your agenda. Is maybe it's not even appropriate because she's in a spot where no matter how hard she would want to try, she's not going to be able to listen very well to what you'll need to discuss. So I think that that's really, really important. And of course, this is all relative to sales as well.
Yeah, and that was something I was always really naturally good at, was sales, and I didn't even know that I was competent in these areas. So I was unconsciously competent in these areas, and I've been able to use them in other areas of my life. Actually another key thing that I neglected to mention is after you get a gauge of where that person is and help them get into a better place if you need to, or they're in a good place already, one of the things I always do before I start going down my rant is I don't say, do you have a minute to talk? Right? That's what a lot of people say, like, I need to talk, or we need to talk. Those are like kiss of death words. The other person always goes on the defensive. I say, do you have a few minutes? Or is now a good time? I want to catch up with you on a few things. It's such a subtle difference, but by saying, do you have the time, or is now a good time, you actually open them up because they realize that you respect their time and you respect their attention. And now that you've asked this question, you can demand 100% of their attention. A lot of times we'll walk into a room and we'll just say what we need to say, and we're like, and then like, and the person's like defensive, and no, but this is, and then we're like in this escalated crazy place where nobody's happy. Where nobody's happy. It just came from nowhere. And now you were just the person that walked in the room and just like crapped all over someone else. Whether you were justified in doing it, doesn't even matter if you're justified. Fairness is an illusion, just like perfection. Like, fairness is not really real. Like, if we just try to make it real, but like, there's equal, right? Like, these two glasses, same glass, they hold the same amount of water. Like, that's equal, but it's not a fair thing. Fairness actually is a construct, and what's actually what we feel is that's fair or not fair. So when we go into these conversations, we really want to make sure that we stay focused on what we want to actually have come out of it versus getting caught up in the problem at hand or the obstacle we're presented with, because we can actually bring the person to the same side of the table as us. And too often we have these conversations and it's like one person's here and one person's here. And then you're looking at each other as the problem versus bringing each other like this, and then you're both looking at the problem together, and then you can actually solve it together, whatever the problem is. So then you have the same perspective because you're looking from the same direction. So it's a really interesting concept, and I hope that you spend some time trying this for yourself, and let us know if this is adding value to your life, and we can do more deep dives on this, and ask any questions you might have. If you comment right now, we can't see the comments, the computer keeps sleeping. So we'll come back and we'll answer them after the live feed's over, and just comment in. So please feel free to give up any information, any ideas, any thoughts, and tag people in this that you think might need to hear this kind of stuff. So is there anything else you want to add to that long-term thinking in relationships and how you approach it, or do you want to shift gears to the next topic?
Well, I heard you say when you were talking about going to the grocery store, and you were talking about talking to the person who is working the cash register. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's an antiquated term now. They're all registers now because very few people pay with cash. So I was listening.
Oh, but I do pay with cash. I like holding on to cash. At first, I loved the credit cards, and it's like, oh, this is easy. It's like I'm not even paying for anything. That's dangerous, right? But cash now, like I love holding. I love the smell of money. I think money's an awesome tool. It's like having like a new wrench, like a new snap-on wrench if you're a mechanic, or a new hammer if you're a carpenter, or a new computer if you're a web designer or you work on the computer. Like those tools give us so much value, right? So when we get that new thing, well, every single time you get a new $1 or 20 or 50 or 100 in your hand, it's like, I got some money, I got some tools, I can go do stuff with this. So I look at it a little bit different. So but at the register. Well, another thing too to take note in is when you show up in a really positive way for any person, even like a toll taker, an antiquated term, right? Again, how often do you pay a toll to a person? But any person that you interact with, if you can show up with trying to see the best version of them, you're going to get the best version. You show up and give them respect, they're going to give you respect, and then it's a ripple effect out into the universe. So you literally will change the future of the entire planet by making one person's day. By giving something to one single person, you actually change the trajectory. Then they go home, and instead of being in an argument with their spouse, they might go home really happy and they have this best day at work because you called them beautiful. Or you said they were doing a great job. Now the next 100 people that they ring up, they got a smile on their face. Even though there's people, when they ask them how you're doing, most people don't even respond to that. You know, when they ask you how you're doing, you tell them. Don't just say I'm fine. Like, tell them how you're doing. Tell them like really honestly in some kind of positive way how you're excited that you have a grocery store that you can get all this great food at and you don't have to like grow your own crops, because that would be a pain in the ass. I've tried it. It's not easy. It doesn't happen by itself. So that will have a ripple effect across the whole entire future of mankind. Every single word you speak, treat it like a prayer. So anything else to add on that?
Well, on your point, it reminded me of a video that I saw on YouTube one time, and I highly recommend that everybody watch this video. It's a beautiful, probably 15, 18 minute long production. It's professional production, and it's called Validated. And I highly recommend that everybody at some point this week take the time, look at it, look it up on YouTube. It'll pop up. It probably has several tens of millions of views by now. I saw it, I don't know, maybe 6 or 7 years ago. But I've gone back to it a few times, and it really has a terrific message that is exactly what you're talking about in this case, Ian, is how you can really change things for the better with the slightest positive little seeds that you drop throughout your life.
Yeah, that's amazing. So we'll add that in the comments after the live feed or sometime during, if I can get somebody else over here to do it. But we'll have that in the comments for you guys. Check it out, bookmark it, and watch it after this live feed or when it calls to you. I like to listen to that stuff when I'm driving. I don't watch it usually. I'll just listen to it. So it's great here in Texas. We drive so much in Texas.
Yes.
So I want to jump over. You have lost 20 pounds in about a month, and the changes you've made have not been like super substantial, but they've had tremendous results. So talk a little bit about what got you into this place where you're like, I need to lose some weight, and then maybe what the first step you took was.
All right. I've been married for 20 plus years, and when you're married, it's easy to gain weight. When you get older, it's easy to gain weight. Why? Because I'm not approaching every meal with the long-term perspective. I'm usually interested in the short term, which is I'm hungry and this looks delicious. Mm. So I've always known that I feel most comfortable in a certain weight range. My clothes feel better. I'm more comfortable in my motions. And as I've reached a certain milestone in our parenting history, our younger son is preparing to graduate from high school, I've known that once that happens, he's going to be going on to college, and our home situation is going to be very different. And I want to do more traveling and more exercise, more hiking, and more adventurous living. Well, when I'm toting around an extra 20 or 30 pounds, it's more difficult to do that. So in preparation, this is what, we're in October.
Yeah.
My son's going to graduate in May. I've wanted to have the weight off well in advance of that and begin incorporating those kinds of activities into my daily and weekly life so that when the time comes, it's not like, oh, suddenly I have to put together a plan and make it happen. No, I've already been living the plan, and now this is just going from one week to the next, and now I can fortify my plans more. So looking at it as with that was really the core thing. This has been a big pivotal milestone date in my mind because our whole parenting obligations shift. So that was one major factor for why I wanted to lose the weight.
Perfect. So before we get on, I would just want to point out for you, now you might not have kids, you might not have this milestone. You can wait until your kids graduate if you have 10 years for them to graduate to lose weight or not. It's totally up to you what you want to do. And maybe you're in perfect health, so this is doesn't even make sense to even be listening to, but actually you're listening for a reason. There might be somebody and you might be able to actually convey this information in another way that gets them on a journey to health. So just bear with us if this doesn't feel like this is exactly what you need to know. Because like anything, if you make a purpose that is bigger than just you, you'll be more motivated to do it. So Clint here saw that I want to feel better, so that's one reason to do it. But actually to be able to go do those activities with his wife and do things that he really enjoys doing, having 20 less pounds is going to make it significantly easier. So that's a huge motivation if you think about it. There's a purpose beyond just the vanity of looking thin, which is where most of us stop at. It's we look at In Shape magazine or whatever magazine they have at the cash register. And we see these people, and they shame people before and after, and sometimes the before is actually them skinny, and now what has happened to them. That's usually what you see at the register. So sometimes you see it the other way, right? But the reality is for you can be whoever you want to be, and you can do it for vain reasons. If that's just you just want to look thinner and look better, whatever. But that's not usually a good enough emotion. A good enough drive for us. Usually having something beyond that is a big deal. So having the ability to go do the things you love to do, having kids out of the house, 2 kids at front of the house. My wife and I keep talking about having one. It's been a topic of conversation more than ever before. And I think about this stuff and I'm well, I don't want to sit back like that, because a lot of people, they get married and they do put on weight and they have kids. All of a sudden another 20, 30 pounds comes on because they don't take care of themselves because they're taking care of someone else, right? So once you find a purpose that's bigger than you, it will make it very easy for you to start taking steps to make changes in any area of your life, especially with the weight loss. So what was the first thing that you did to actually say, okay, this is how I'm going to do it? Because a lot of people struggle with this. They do Nutrisystem or join all kinds of Weight Watchers programs, whatever it might be. What is it that you did to, because this is pretty effective, 20 pounds in a month. It's huge.
Well, let me go back and say that there's another reason. And this is really even, if you can believe it, even more long-term, more long-range focused. But I have a goal, and when I tell people this goal, they laugh. But it's my goal nonetheless, and I will achieve my goal. My goal is to live to be 120 years old, and I want to have quality of life up until I drop. So every decision that I make regarding my health is geared toward that goal, is living to 120 without having to have people taking care of me. I'm past 40 now, and as you get older, you realize that there are these thresholds where you lose abilities that you had before, and you gain problems that you never had before, whether it's with your skin, your hair, your thinking, your digestion, whatever it is. You notice these kinds of changes. As you get older, they become more and more prevalent. So I've tried to take an active, proactive role, actually, in making sure that anything that I've seen other people go through, I'm addressing it now. For example, there's been some heart issues in my family. And so I did the research that suited me, and I found out what causes heart attacks, what helps you avoid heart attacks, and I've modified my diet based upon how to reduce heart attacks. And so now I have a plan in place for doing that very specific thing, I don't even think about it because I make my decisions unconsciously or subconsciously, probably unconsciously, because it's just a format in which I can now use to decide, again, black or white, yes or no, do I go forward? So that's really one of my big objectives that keeps me going on a daily basis.
That's huge. Yeah, that's huge. So you might not be a researcher. Clint's gone back a couple times talking about how he's researched this or that. Quite honestly, research can be as quickly as YouTubing it and just making sure that the source that you watch is good and spending 20 minutes and you can learn a plethora of information that's going to just help you make better decisions. I should actually say better choices about everything. So it's the longer you wait, the harder it usually is to come back. I've actually put on weight before, and when I started getting the belly, like it freaked me out at first, and then I got fatter, and then I had to really hustle to get it to start burning off. And now I feel like, honestly, if I do the right things today, I feel younger tomorrow, and that's why I don't go to the doctors. I'm so incredibly healthy. Aside from chiropractic and deep massage, otherwise I'm sorted, and I feel actually younger pretty much every day, unless I drink one night, then I might feel my age. So I totally am on board with you, 120 and have quality of life, and rather than having the quality of life where, it kind of went like this for a time in history, and then like this slow decline in the last 10, 20 years was miserable. You wouldn't even want to live. There are a lot of people out there now that get up here and they just kind of keep climbing and they kind of just plateau and then just drop and die. I want to actually just keep doing this, and then the body just be like, you know what, I can't do this anymore. And then I can get swallowed back up into the absolute, the source. Because I don't believe that we have a life. I believe we actually are life. So we just have a body, right? This is my body. I am not body. So
your current expression.
Yes, my current expression of this thing that allows me to have this personality, this sparkling. Probably have spinach on my teeth from my smoothie. So you did some research, but then you found an app and you actually started making some changes. So talk
about that. What was the first thing that I did?
Yeah.
And it actually goes back to before I found the app. If any of you are familiar with, and this is a loaded question, if any of you are familiar with the law of attraction, then you will understand this. But I thought about it for quite a while, and I thought about it deeply. And I thought about what I was trying to accomplish and how I was going to do it. Not so much in, am I going to cut out this food or that food or anything else, but I just got my energy, my body, my mind, my soul adjusted to the fact that there's this major change coming up. And as a result, information started coming to me that wouldn't have come to me otherwise, or at least hadn't come to me before I made this kind of an initial change in my mental state or my energy or whatever, so that I could invite these things in. So that was really the first thing that I did, was I got myself used to the idea that this change is coming up, and I allowed the universe to bring me its first steps toward helping me get there. And part of that, you mentioned the app. I downloaded an app, and there are a lot of food intake tracking apps out there, and they're usually married to a fitness app as well. I don't have a fitness app, but I do track a little bit of my activity. But it was really a wake-up call. It was really a wake-up call. And one thing that I've done with clients is I'll have them track their time to find out what are they really investing their day-to-day time on. And it becomes quite illuminating. You put this in the format of tracking what I'm eating every day. First of all, I was surprised to see that I was eating not a few items a day. I was actually eating dozens of items a day. Another thing that became readily apparent, and this is a screaming conclusion, and this applies to virtually everybody in the United States, is we live in an area where food is so abundant and so inexpensive that our portion sizes become quite large, much larger than what our body needs to sustain us. So the tracking app really helped me see how I was blowing it out with huge portions. And then the other really key thing that I learned as a result of downloading and using the tracking app is that it's the little things that will set you back the most. 80-20, Pareto's law definitely comes into play. Pareto's principle, it's not a law. Pareto's principle definitely comes into play here that 80% of the results are caused by 20% of the factors. So I found that, for example, I've always loved salads and I've always eaten huge salads, but I'll put a healthy amount. I would put a healthy amount of dressing, ranch or Italian dressing, and then I'd crunch up some croutons or something like that on top as well. And I found out that it was the quantity of the dressing and the type of dressing that I chose that really would make that salad into something that, rather than being something that promoted my health, was something that was merely camouflaging the damage that those 20% factors were doing to my diet. So really, it's the app and the awareness that actively working with the app and bringing my awareness to what was I really putting into my body that really was a first genesis, a first starting point of really moving forward.
Awesome. That's so important. And do you know the name of the app?
There are many out there. The one I use is by an organization called Nutritionix, or that may be the name of the app. So it's nutrition with IX on the end.
And we'll put a link here in the comments, and maybe I can get somebody to do that now, but we'll get a link in the comments for you guys if you want. It's not his app. He's not selling the app. It's just, he showed it to me. It's really simple. It allows you to track what you're doing, what you're actually eating. Mm-hmm. And actually, I think you mentioned to me just the fact that you've got to now track this and enter everything in there sometimes curbs your eating because you don't want to have to enter into the app. Right? Like it's like, because we're inherently lazy as humans. Like we just want to do the least amount possible and get the most amount of results, which I guess isn't necessarily, could be not lazy, it actually could be really effective, right? We just want to be effective. So I'll reframe that one. So I just heard it say so many times, I've heard it said so many times that we are inherently lazy, but actually we just want to get the maximum amount of returns with the least amount of effort, which actually is a very compelling argument. So I'm going to definitely reframe that one. So just that act of having to track this stuff is going to actually reduce what you eat so that you can save time in these areas. And a lot of things that, I really want to build on what Clint said, because we overeat, like we really overeat. I've been eating so much less over the last, call it 3 months. And I just started doing intermittent fasting where essentially I don't eat after 8 p.m. or until 11 a.m. typically. So I got this long fasting period. And what happened was that my stomach shrank and I started burning the fat off my body for a lot of energy. So I got leaner, which made me feel good. And we get really good quality energy when we actually burn the fat that's in our body. It's actually really, really powerful stuff. But what happens is when we overeat, we fill our stomach up and we actually have to use a lot of energy to try to process and use all those nutrients. So we actually end up tired from eating too much. And then we're carrying too much with us and our body goes into this mode where we just start storing this extra stuff just in case we can't eat for 6 months, or eat well for 6 months like used to happen because seasons, right? We didn't have as much to eat in the winter. So we went through hundreds of years in this cycle, but now we always have access to our food. So the leaner we can actually stay, the more energized we're going to be. You'll find that actually you eat less, which means you spend less money, you spend less time eating, shopping, cleaning dishes, preparing, all those things that go into food. So you'll actually regain a bunch of time for your life. So there's so many different advantages to using an app like this and just tracking what you're doing. So that being said, I really wanted to also call to attention an underlying theme with every bit of our conversation today. It's all about awareness. It's all about being conscious. so that you can make the choices. If you have awareness around what you're trying to accomplish in the conversation with your employees or the employees that you deal with when you call a company, or in your personal relationships, and awareness what you want to accomplish and what your overarching end goal is and your short-term goals. And then again, awareness of what your goals are with your health, and awareness with what you're actually doing on a minute-to-minute basis or an hour-to-hour basis or a day-to-day basis around what you're eating. Just gaining awareness in these things helps you make such big leaps and gains consistently. And that's one thing that's really great every time Clint and I are talking here, is it helps bring more awareness to whatever topic we're on. Because in case you didn't notice, we can go into pretty depth and we can switch gears on conversation a lot and see a lot of meaning between little things. But it wasn't always like that. But the more we connected and the more we actually learned to actively listen and become aware of the other person, our conversations became much more dynamic. So, is there anything else you want to add about the diet, the weight loss?
Well, there is something that's very important that I'd like to add about the weight loss and anything you're doing with your health. I personally respect physicians, but I view physicians and any medical provider as a consultant. But I'm still the CEO. I'm the one who makes the decisions about what goes on, what treatments I get, what treatments I forego, what strategy is going to be adopted. The physician can tell me, and then I will think about it. I'll possibly do some additional research on it, but I make the final decision. I highly encourage you to make, if you're going to make any decisions about your health, changes to where you are now, maybe you want to lose weight or increase activity or whatever you're trying to do, always do it with as much information as possible, and make sure that your trusted medical providers are a part of your information source so that you can make the best decision possible.
That's the legal disclaimer that he likes to use?
No. Certainly there is that aspect to it.
I'm not a doctor.
But it's critical to know that you are not going to have all the problems and all the solutions that will come to you. You're going to need to have a key conversation with somebody so that you become aware of a problem that you didn't know existed, or a relationship between two things in your health that you didn't know existed before. Certainly the internet is a good source of some health information, but you have to view it with a little bit of a grain of distrust. Has to pass a higher threshold. Books are fantastic resources because then you can revisit a certain paragraph or a certain concept over and over and over again as your understanding evolves to know more about your ailing back or your knee issue, or why is it that my arms are flabby, or what can I do to get rid of this skin problem. As you learn more about these things, then going to a book that is a book that you like, a well-written book, and you can go back and continue visiting that, you'll glean more out of that same article, that same chapter, that same paragraph, than you will the first time that you read it. So I highly encourage you to educate yourself, and you had mentioned that the theme of this whole discussion that we've had is awareness. Please have awareness of what your body is telling you. Your medical providers are all trying to get information when they're diagnosing what's going on with you. They're trying to understand what's your body telling you. And if you are listening to your body, and this wasn't here before and now it's here, this is a little bit different and now it's changed, what am I doing to influence these factors? If I change this, how does it affect my hair growth or my skin tone or my energy level? Pay attention to those kinds of things. Write them down if you want, but definitely be thinking about them so that they're in your awareness.
That is so well put. There's actually a woman that I met. She spoke at one of the events that I attended. Her name is Robin Farmarian. She wrote a book called The Patient as the CEO. And
Fantastic.
And
There you go.
right along with what you're talking about here, she was diagnosed with like 7 different autoimmune diseases, and she reversed all of them through actually taking control of her own body, her own health, and not just going to doctors and having them keep doling out, this is what's wrong with you. And, I've actually lived that myself. I was told that I had so many concussions from racing motorcycles that I had brain damage. I was told that I would never walk straight again. I broke my hip, I broke my back, I'd done a lot of damage to my body. And now, just about to turn 40, I still can do a backflip into a pool or a trampoline or something like that. To me, that's kind of like a measure of like how good my body's feeling. But I can still I can go back and ride motocross again and doing really well with that. And, actually when I go to the gym, I'm still increasing the amount of weight I can move, the amount of endurance I have. And I have some not so healthy habits too. So, I always try to work on that stuff. But, just listen to yourself. Like, don't let anybody tell you that something's not possible for you just because they have doctor in front of their name, or MD at the end of their name. At the end of the day, like, you know yourself better than anybody else. So one of my things that I always practice, and I'll encourage you to, is if a doctor tells you something you don't want to hear, keep looking for new doctors until you find one that says what you do want to hear, because that, go back to law of attraction or faith, that actually can change the direction. Doctors are not a new religion that people like to treat them as. So really, really investigate what's going on with you and what's important, what you would like changed, and not just how things are, but how you would actually like them to be. So that's really all I got on that piece. Is there anything else you want to add?
No, I'm glad that you mentioned that book, Patient as CEO,
Yeah.
because there have been family members that close to me who have autoimmune issues, and I'm definitely going to check out that book. Even I'll look for the audiobook. But
yeah, I mean, not many of us have time to read and highlight anymore. Every once in a while I'll get time to read, but I always got time for an audiobook. Even if I fall asleep to it, I know it's like somehow going into my subconscious.
Well, with my ADD, I've never been too good at book reading.
Yeah.
I just get too bored too quickly.
So I'll throw something at you for the ADD. I recently learned if you actually stare at nature, so even if you just have like a tree outside your office window, if you stare at it for 40 seconds a day from a distance, not like up close looking at grass, but actually look out to a distance, like try to look far out and look at something in nature, your attention span will increase. So you got to do it 40 seconds. Another thing that actually was taught to me, and I didn't realize is what was being taught to me, was I studied with Yogi Ganda, I guess that's what they're called, up in Dallas, and stayed there for a couple of days. And he actually had me just draw a black dot, the size of a quarter. So you can just put it on a piece of paper, do a circle around it, make a black dot with a Sharpie, and just tack it to your wall. And just stare at that dot as long as you can, and just do this once a day without blinking as long as you can do it. So you're going to want to just keep working up. Maybe in the beginning it's only 10 seconds, but once you get to like that 3-minute range where you can like stare at that dot, all of a sudden your focus, your ability to hold your attention becomes like a reaction, a natural reaction. So ADD is very, very reversible. Mm-hmm. The thing is, we have so much media blasting at us all the time. You're on Facebook right now, and you're watching this video. As soon as you go off, you're going to have the new news showing up, and you refresh it, or you can scroll forever, and just new content constantly with different ads. You go to other sites, they have things flashing, videos popping up, all kinds of things coming at us. That's just when you're staring at your computer screen. When you're going out during the day, there's so much media, so much stuff competing for your attention, and that's what's causing our ADD, is that there's something always trying to come at us. So the more you practice these focus type exercises, the more you'll be able to have laser focus and be able to just stare right into something the way I'm staring at this camera right now, the way I'm looking at you. If you can practice this kind of stuff, just on any simplistic level, it will help you when you're working, when you're in conversations, when every single facet of your life. And having this ability to hold your attention on one thing, be able to keep your eyes locked into something, and be centered, is a game changer. When it comes naturally, life gets so much easier. So if you're struggling with ADD or ADHD or any kind of attention difficulty, even if you're not, I challenge you, try this. I encourage you, try this. Like, it has really, really made my life significantly easier. And another cool thing is you can always win staring contests. Unless you're with a cat. My cat always beats me. Well, I think I beat him once, but I think I tricked him with wet food or something. So, anything else you want to say, parting here, Clint, for the viewers?
Thank you very much for allowing me to come out and chat and see your viewers.
Awesome. Yeah, so guys, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Clint, for coming on. This is not something Clint normally does, so it's really cool to get him in front of an audience like this, and let him know what you think. Let me know what you think of this. And if you think anything in here resonates with you or should resonate with somebody else, please share this, and please comment and tag people in it, because it will help get the word out about this information. And we need to hear it. We need to hear it over and over again. Not just you listening. Every single time I'm speaking these words, I know I'm speaking because I need to hear them too. It keeps me on track. It keeps me focused. It keeps me making things happen for myself. So this is so incredibly fundamentally important to our success as beings. If we want to just work, we could just work. But I think those days are over. I think we want to actually play and enjoy ourselves. Maybe I'm alone in that. I don't know. Let me know. So thanks so much for tuning in. Please share this and spread the love. Have a great day, and hopefully we'll see you soon. Cheers.